everybody. Today we have Spencer Feldman with us, and we are going to be talking about our stage 2 detox. It's a great detox that handles a lot of your internal organs, immune system, digestion. Typically recommended to go, after your phase 1 detox, and before diving into any of the lymphatic, cardiovascular, or digestive peptides, because you really want to make sure you detox all of those. So, Spencer, if you can talk about stage 2 detox and how it relates and how we can take it.
The stage 2 you were talking about, and you'd ask me, let's say someone does the first stage, the basics, the metals, the chemicals, opening up the liver, the gallbladder, the kidneys, and being able to drain all this stuff out. What's the next step? And the next step is going after some of the sequelae, some of the things that the first stage created. So when we are toxic long enough, the immune system starts to go downhill, and the body starts doing things like, it starts getting chronic infections and parasites and biofilms and things like this. So for people that have, been toxic long enough, that just pulling the toxins out isn't enough. And parasites and chronic infections, they both are you could say they're in the composting side of the world. Now, there are parasites in third world countries you can get that are very aggressive infections. But most of the parasites we're exposed to are more like the kind of worms that are going in a compost pile. They're there to turn dying and diseased matter back into vital and healthy soil. And if we're not healthy ourselves, then the parasites will set up shop in us. Now, we are always eating parasite eggs. We are always eating fungal spores. We're always eating bacteria. We're always eating viruses. There's no sterile world anywhere. So, so the idea isn't just to kill these things. The idea is also coexist with them. And yes, there are some things you want to kill. Hemorrhagic virus, Ebola. You don't want to coexist with it. You want to kill it. Right? Basically, the way it is the newer the infection, the more aggressive it is. So something like Ebola that is relatively new hasn't learned to coexist with other species yet. And so it ends up being so aggressive that it kills its host and then it stops replicating, which isn't a good survival strategy. Something like herpes has been around for a lot longer. And herpes is smart enough to realize has evolved not to kill its host, right? And because it doesn't kill its host, it spreads, and almost everybody has, oral herpes somewhere in the nerves of their mouth. Like an example, think of polio. Polio was not as big of a deal 100 years ago because it was in the water and it was a mild form and people were mostly immune to it. But then they chlorinated the water supply, which was great, but also it killed all the mild polio. So that when polio finally came back, it came back in an aggressive form, a devolved form, in a group of people that had no immunity, and then we had a polio outbreak. So think of these two classes of things. There's the really aggressive things that are relatively new, like Ebola, but most things have been around for a long time, and they're really more in that composting space. They're like, hey, you know what, we're not in a rush. We'll just hang out in the tissue. We're not going to bother you. And then when you die, we might start nibbling on you, or we kind of will be there in the background. That's the evolution of these most diseases, infections. And parasites and viruses and bacteria, a lot of them fall into that category, which can make them very difficult to get rid of because they don't necessarily trigger the immune system. They can evade the immune system. So one of the ways that they do that, among other things, is they'll create a biofilm. They'll live on a surface. And we could talk about biofilms for hours. I think there's a video on our website, remedylink.com, in the video page, where you can actually get into biofilms much more. So the biofilms will protect the infections from the immune system. It's like this layer of mucus. And so one of the things you want to do is you want to, break down that mucus barrier so that the immune system can get to the infection. And there's a couple of ways you can do that. Our Notaplex product is serrapeptase as a suppository. And the reason we make anything as a suppository is typically, the main reason we do it is because the ingredients wouldn't survive digestion. And serrapeptase is an enzyme, and as great as it is, most of it does not survive swallowing. You might get 1% or 2%, but you can get all of it if you take it rectally. And we've had a number of people tell us after taking serrapeptase rectally that they passed liver flukes. Don't know why, what it pisses them. I don't know what serrapeptase does to piss off the liver fluke, but I've had it happen enough times now that it's no longer just coincidence. So part of the stage 2 is going after these biofilms and their infections and the parasites. And one of the things you can do, even though Notoplex with serrapeptase was originally designed to support the body in dealing with scar tissue, is it actually turns out to be really fantastic at unmasking, supporting the body at unmasking chronic infection. ZOIBEN is the other one in that category. And the way ZOIBEN works is, think back about what it was like to eat food 10,000 years ago, before farmers, for the last, since the agricultural revolution, we've been trying to grow sweeter and sweeter food. So we take the bitter apples and they turn them into, very sweet apples. And you take the super tart grapes and you turn them into table grapes. And you did that by generation after generation of picking and fertilizing the sweetest of the sweetest fruit and the sweetest vegetables. And so now the fruits and vegetables we eat now are almost unrecognizable next to what they were 10,000 years ago. They've taken all the bitter elements out, but the bitter elements were the medicinal parts of plants. They're the parts that the plants use to protect themselves against viruses, fungi, bacteria, and cancer. So we've selectively taken the medicine out of our food. The other thing plants do to protect themselves against viruses, fungi, parasites, bacteria, and cancer is they create essential oils. Now the essential oils haven't necessarily changed, but when you pick the fruit or vegetable and then you cook it, even if you eat it raw, just picking it, the essential oils tend to volatilize out, very volatile, evaporate out. So unless you're eating food that's freshly picked off that day, and that food is the version that was 10,000 years ago, you're not really getting the medicine that was originally in the food. And what that medicine was designed to do, those essential oils that we find, and the bitters, which is what ZOIBEN is, it's those two categories. It's the bitters and essential oils, edible essential oils. What they do is they dissolve biofilms and they confuse the infections with, among other things, something called quorum sensing, which is when the biofilm community is growing, it doesn't want to become overpopulated. So it communicates with its neighbors to say, okay, do we have too many of us for the food supply and area, or not enough? And if it's not enough, let's grow and let's create new water transport systems and new food transport systems and new, let's keep going, let's keep growing. And if the real estate in the area that it's growing on, or the food supply is too low, it'll say, hey, let's slow down, we're growing too fast. And it does that by quorum sensing, which is like, hey, how many of us are there? And how many bugs are next to me? If there's not enough bugs next to me, I'll grow. And if there's too many bugs, I'll shrink down or maybe even kill myself. Right? That's how they do that. And the bitters confuse the quorum sensing of the bugs. So you're telling it, you're not trying to kill it. You can't really. I mean, there'll be more later. It'll be sleeper cells. Like, you can't kill these things. But you can convince them to go to sleep. So it's like, so you have to understand, there's sometimes you want to kill a bug, and sometimes you want to sing the bug a lullaby and let it go to sleep, and it can come and have you when you're dead. So the ZOIBEN is aimed at the second. It's for that class of infections that is almost impossible to kill because they're sophisticated enough to have sleeper cells where if you kill 99%, 1% is metabolically inactive and will sleep for a couple of lunar cycles and then wake up and repopulate the whole thing. So ZOIBEN is designed to say, hey guys, just first off, let's get you all confused so you can't communicate properly, and then dissolve you so you have less protection, and say, hey, why don't you guys all take a nap? The Allergica was created when my son, who was, I guess, 3 at the time, was visiting relatives on the other side of the country, and I get a phone call, he's sick. Like, what has he got? And I'm like, geez, for the symptoms, virus, bacteria, I mean, theoretically parasite or fungi, but kind of unlikely. I don't know what he has. So like, what do we do? And I'm like, all right, go buy these 18 different things, right? It's one for every class of infection I can think of. I'm like, oh God, this is crazy. I got to come up with one shotgun approach. So, I started looking at what could I do to make something that would go after viruses and fungi and bacteria and parasites and everything. And one of the first things I'm looking at is ellagic acid. And ellagic acid can unspool bacterial DNA. I'm like, okay, cool. Check mark on the bacteria box. Well, what does this say farther down? Ellagic acid inhibits integrase. Oh, that's a viral enzyme that viruses need to enter into cells. Oh, check the viral box. What's that? Ellagic acid can inhibit chitin synthase 2, the enzyme that fungi and yeast need to build their cell walls. Check off on the yeast and fungal box. Oh, what's this? Ellagic acid has some undetermined method of going after parasites? Wow. Holy cow. Reading farther down, ellagic acid stimulates apoptosis to make cancerous and precancerous cells commit suicide. Wow. So I originally was thinking I was going to have a product with like 20 different ingredients in it, and basically it was just one ingredient and then a few cofactors to help it do its job better. But the other ingredients are all in a supportive role to the ellagic acid, which is molecule of the year as far as I'm concerned. So, why would I use ellagic acid? Well, it's for that class of infections you do want to kill, right? You've got the class of infections that you can't kill, not very easily, but you can put to sleep. And you've got the class of infections you can't really put to sleep, but you can kill them. And so there's that. Now, why would we call that stage 2? Well, if someone's been toxic long enough and their immune system's dragged down enough and their body's drained enough, then they're going to be more likely to have these infections manifest, because these bugs are always being eaten, swallowed, breathed, touched, drunk in. But if you're healthy, your body either kills them or puts them to sleep and shows them the door. But if you're late to the game of detox, and now you're say 40 and you haven't detoxed and you've had these toxins in for a while, well, you might have some infections you got to deal with. The lymplex also falls into that category. It's designed to get the lymphatic system moving. So does exercise, and so does good breath work. But it's also nice to go in there and really just kind of support the lymphatic nodes and the lymphatic fluid, which is by volume greater than your blood. And the lymphatic fluid is basically the sewer system of the cells. It's where all the cells dump the wastes that they create during their metabolic activity. And not everybody has a metabolic system, their lymphatic system moving right now. So there's the lymplex. So, between the lymplex and the ellagica and the ZOIBEN and the nodoplex, I think that we've got that second stage working dialed in pretty well, which is the stuff that starts to manifest if you haven't detoxed yourself for a long time.
Perfect. So the big thing I know that a lot of people talk about is ZOIBEN helps people with digestive system. They see a huge increase in being able to process things that wouldn't be processed previously, as well. So it's a good, the way I kind of, with the stage 2 detox is a good one for just all of your internal organs that are critical for kind of the first defense, right? It's your immune system, your lymphatic system, your digestion, so which is all kind of where your first line of defense against parasites, microbes, bacteria, so all of the bad things you want to try to keep out.
Yeah, again, ZOIBEN was designed to replace all the things that modern agricultural revolution has removed. All the bitters, all the essential oils that we would be eating if we were in a pre-industrial Amazonian tribe, or in Africa or wherever. And bitters have a long history of helping with digestion because they stimulate the gastric juices and so forth and so on. And the bitter flavors are all the medicines in Europe found. Medicines are rarely sweet. Most of the medicinal compounds and plants are extremely bitter. And so I picked the two bitterest things that are available on the planet that were not problematic to take. So we put it in there, and the taste of it, actually, it's important. It's important to have that bitter taste on your tongue.
Yeah, we've had people asking if we can make it taste any better.
Yeah, and the funny thing is, you taste it and it's perfectly bitter, and then the first reaction typically happens is you start to laugh. And laughter is usually a sign that your body's kind of getting something it wants and is releasing. And so yes, it tastes very bitter, but you will find yourself acclimating to it pretty quick, to the point where you'll actually be like, yeah, it's bitter. Let me get that again. Let me have a little more of that, because your body's like, oh, it's like in the same way that if you don't do sweets for a while, and then someone gives you a glass of apple juice, it's like, oh my God, I can't even drink it. It's so sweet. There's so much sugar in this, because you got used to it. Well, we've gotten used to not having any bitters in our food, but but once you start taking them in, and your body goes, oh, okay, I get it, bitters, sure. Then your body kind of recalibrates, and it'll actually start asking for them. Like, hey, you know what? I could use some of that. And what I find when I take bitters is I just feel stronger and cleaner. It's a strange sensation to feel strong and clean from taking bitters, but those are the only two words that come to mind. Somehow I feel like it squeezes all the weak, dirty junk out of me, and what's left behind is just clean and strong version of me.
Yeah, that makes sense. Kind of.
Yeah, your experience may be different than mine, but I find that I end up craving it every once in a while. My body knows, like, oh, it's time for some bitters. I can feel it. I'm like, oh, yeah, that was good.
And then, so with the stage 2 detox, I typically recommend people to repeat it, 6 months to a year. What's a typical recommendation to go through stage 2 again?
Well, if you get sick, right? If I get sick, right off the bat, I'm pounding Elagic and ZOIBEN. I had a sinus infection, and I actually started mixing the ZOIBEN in water, diluting it, and putting it in through a sinus wash. And the results are immediate. It's like the sinus immediately cleared up, like a minute and a half. Granted, do not use that full strength in your sinus. It's got a clove oil in it. So I'm talking about, I had a cup of salt water, and I put in like I don't know, like a quarter teaspoon of the ZOIBEN, something like that. I mixed it in, and start slow. But yeah, it was amazing. So I would say you could, if you live on a farm, there's annual dewormings. Everybody, all the animals and all the people deworm once a year. So, that's kind of classic thing for parasites.